Hare Krishna, welcome back to our online reading retreat labs. So we are continuing with Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, canto number 1. Till the last 5 days, you can see we have completed the page number till 28 of the hard copy. As I mentioned in my previous episodes, if you do not have the hard copy of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, you can always reach out to me and I will help you in getting the authentic copy of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, the entire set. So if you do not have the hard copy, you can always go through the Vedabase, the online version, which is freely available. But I will always recommend to read the hard copy always. So let's get started. I will share my screen for to navigate you through the Vedabase. Yeah. So we have covered till the page number 28, the paragraph, last paragraph, one of the four most intimate devotees. We're reading about Ramanand Rai, Sri Damodar Goswami, who is the private secretary of Lord Chaitanya. So now we will start from this paragraph. The Lord extensively traveled all over the southern part of India. The great saint of Maharashtra, known as Saint Tukaram, was also initiated by the Lord. Saint Tukaram, after initiation by the Lord, overflooded the whole of the Maharashtra province with the Sankirtan movement, and the transcendental flow is still rolling on the southwestern part of the great Indian peninsula. The Lord excavated the South India to very important old literatures, namely the Brahma Samhita and Krishna Karnamrita. And these two valuable books are authorized studies for the person in the devotional line. The Lord then returned to Puri after his South Indian tour. On his return to Puri, all the anxious devotees of the Lord got back their life, and the Lord remained there with continued pastimes of his transcendental realizations. The most important incident during that time was his granting audience to King Pratavrudra. King Pratavrudra was a great devotee of the Lord, and he considered himself to be the one of the servants of the Lord, entrusted with sweeping the temple. This submissive attitude of the king was very much appreciated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The king requested both Bhattacharya and Rai to arrange his meeting with the Lord. When, however, the Lord was petitioned by his two stalwart devotees, he flatly refused to grant the request, even though it was put forward by personal associates like Ramananda Rai and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. The Lord maintained that it is dangerous for a sannyasi to be in intimate touch with worldly, money-conscious men and with women. The Lord was an ideal sannyasi. No woman could approach the Lord even to offer respects. Women's seat were recommended far away from the Lord. As an ideal teacher and acharya, he was very strict in the routine work of a sannyasi. Apart from being a divine incarnation, the Lord was an ideal character as a human being. His behavior with other persons was also above suspicion. In his dealing with Acharya, he was harder than the thunderbolt and softer than the rose. One of his associates, Junior Haridas, committed a great mistake by lustfully glancing at a young woman. The Lord, a super soul, could detect this lost in the mind of Junior Haridas, who was at once banished from the Lord's association and was never accepted again, even though the Lord was implored to excuse Haridas for the mistake. Junior Haridas afterwards committed suicide due to being dissociated from the company of the Lord, and the news of suicide was duly related to the Lord. Even at that time, the Lord was not forgetful of the offense, and he said Haridas had rightly met with the proper punishment. On the principles of the renounced order of life and discipline, the Lord knew no compromise, and therefore, even though he knew that the king was a great devotee, he refused to see the king only because the king was a dollar and cent man. By this example, the Lord wanted to emphasize the proper behavior for a transcendentalist. A transcendentalist has nothing to do with women and money. He must always refrain from such intimate relations. The king was, however, favored by the Lord by the expert arrangement of the devotees. This means that the beloved devotee of the Lord can favor a neophyte more liberally than the Lord. Pure devotees, therefore, never commit an offense at the feet of another pure devotee. An offense at the lotus feet of the Lord is sometimes excused by the merciful Lord, but an offense at the feet of a devotee is very dangerous for one who actually wants to make progress in devotional service. As long as the Lord remained at Puri, thousands of his devotees used to come to see him during the Rath Yatra, car festival of Lord Jagannath. And during the car festival, the washing of the Vindicha temple under the direct supervision of the Lord was an important function. The Lord's congregational Sankirtan movement at Puri was a unique exhibition for the mass of people. That is the way to turn the mass mind towards spiritual realization. The Lord inaugurated the system of mass Sankirtan, and leaders of all countries can take advantage of this spiritual movement in order to keep the mass of people in a pure state of peace and friendship with one another. This is now the demand of the present human society all over the world. After some time, the Lord again started on his tour towards northern India and he decided to visit Vrindavan and its neighboring places. He passed through the jungles of Jharkhand, Madhya Bharata, and all the wild animals also joined his Sankirtan movement. The wild tigers, elephants, bears, and deer all together accompanied the Lord, and the Lord accompanied them in Sankirtan. By this, he proved that by the propagation of the Sankirtan movement, congregational chanting and glorifying of the holy name of the name of the Lord, even the wild animals can live in peace and friendship. And what to speak of men who are supposed to be civilized? No man in the world will refuse to join the Sankirtan movement, nor is the Lord's Sankirtan movement restricted to any caste, creed, color, and species. Here is a direct evidence of his great mission. He allowed even the wild animals to partake in his great movement. On his way back from Vrindavan, he first came to Prayaga, where he met Rupa Goswami along with his younger brother Anupama. Then he came down to Benares, Varanasi. For 2 months, he instructed Sri Sanatana Goswami in the transcendental science. The instruction to Sanatana Goswami is in itself a long narration, and full presentation of the instruction will not be possible here. The main ideas are given as follows. Sanatan Goswami, formerly known as Sakar Malik, was in the cabinet service of the Bengal government under the regime of Nawab Hussain Saha. He decided to join with the Lord and thus retired from the service. On his way back from Vrindavan, when he reached Varanasi, the Lord became the guest of Sri Tapan Mishra and Chandrasekhara, assisted by a Maharashtra Brahmana. At that time, Varanasi was headed by a great sannyasi of the Mayavad school named Sripada Prakashanand Saraswati. When the Lord was at Varanasi, the people in general became more attracted to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on account of his mass Sankirtan movement. Wherever he visited, especially the Vishwanath temple, thousands of pilgrims would follow him. Some were attracted by his bodily features, and others were attracted by his melodious songs glorifying the Lord. The Mayavadi sannyasis designate themselves as Narayana. Varanasi is still overflooded with many Mayavadi sannyasis. Some people who saw the Lord in his Sankirtana party considered him to be actually Narayana. And this report reached the camp of the great sannyasi Prakashananda. In India, there's always a kind of spiritual rivalry between the Mayavad and Bhagavata schools. And thus, when the news of the Lord reached Prakashanand, he knew that the Lord was a Vaishnava sannyasi, and therefore he minimized the value of the Lord before those who brought him the news. He deprecated the activities of the Lord because of his preaching of the Sankirtan movement, which was in his opinion nothing but a religious sentiment. Prakasnand was a profound student of the Vedanta, and he advised his followers to give attention to the Vedanta and not to indulge in Sankirtana. One devotee Brahmana, who became a devotee of the Lord, didn't like the criticism of Prakasnand, and he went to Lord to express his regrets. He told the Lord that when he uttered the Lord's name before the sannyasi, Prakashananda, the latter strongly criticized the Lord, although the Brahmana had heard Prakashanand uttering several times the name Chaitanya. The Brahmana was astonished to see that the sannyasi Prakashan couldn't vibrate the sound Krishna even once, although he uttered the name Chaitanya several times. The Lord smilingly explained to the devotee Brahmana why the Mayavadi cannot utter the holy name of Krishna. The Mayavadis are offenders at the lotus feet of Krishna, although they utter always Brahma, Atma, or Chaitanya, etc. And because they are offenders at the lotus feet of Krishna, they are actually unable to utter the holy name of Krishna. The name Krishna and the personality of Godhead Krishna are identical. There is no difference in the absolute realm between the name, form, or person of the absolute truth, because in the absolute realm, everything is transcendental bliss. There is no difference between the body and the soul of the personality of Godhead Krishna. Thus, he is different from the living entity who is always different from his outward body. Because of Krishna's transcendental position, it is very difficult for a layman to actually know the personality of Godhead Krishna, his holy name and fame, etc. His name, fame, form, and pastimes all are one and the same transcendental identity, and they are not knowable by the exercise of the material senses. The transcendental relationship of the pastimes of the Lord is a source of still more bliss than one can experience by realization of Brahman or by becoming one with the Supreme. Had it not been so, then those who are already situated in the transcendental bliss of Brahman would not have been attracted by the transcendental bliss of the pastimes of the Lord. After this, a great meeting was arranged by the devotees of the Lord in which all the sannyasis were invited, including the Lord and Prakasnand Saraswati. In this meeting, both the scholars, the Lord and Prakasnand, had a long discourse of the spiritual values of the Sankirtan movement, and a summary is given below. The great Mayavadi sannyasi Prakasna inquired from the Lord as to the reason for his preferring the Sankirtan movement to the study of the Vedanta Sutra. Prakashnan said that it is the duty of a sannyasi to read the Vedanta Sutra. What caused the Lord to indulge in Sankirtana? After this inquiry, the Lord submissively replied, I have taken to the Sankirtan movement instead of the study of the Vedanta because I am a great fool. The Lord thus represented himself as one of the numberless fools of this age who are absolutely incapable of studying the Vedanta philosophy. The fool's indulgence in study of Vedanta has caused so much havoc in society. The Lord has continued, and because I am a great fool, my spiritual master forbade me to play with Vedanta philosophy. He said that it is better to that I chant the holy name of the Lord, for that would deliver me from material bondage. In this age of Kali, there is no other religion but the glorification of the Lord by utterance of His holy name, and that is the injunction of all the revealed scriptures. And my spiritual master has taught me one sloka from the Naradya Purana. Naradya Purana. Harer Nama, Harer Nama eva kevalam, Kalo nasti, eva nasti, eva gati anyatha. So, on the order of my spiritual master, I chant the holy name of Hari, and I am now mad after this holy name. Whenever I utter the holy name, I forget myself completely, and sometimes I laugh, cry, and dance like a madman. I thought that I had actually gone mad by this process of chanting, and therefore I asked my spiritual master about it. He informed me that this was the real effect of chanting the holy name. which produces a transcendental emotion that is a rare manifestation. It is a sign of love of God, which is the ultimate end of life. Love of God is transcendental to liberation, mukti, and thus it is called the fifth stage of spiritual realization, above the stage of liberation. By chanting the holy name of Krishna, one attains the stage of love of God. And it was good that fortunately I was favored with the blessing. On hearing the statement from the Lord, the Mayavadi sannyasi asked what was the harm in studying the Vedanta along with chanting the holy name. Prakasnand Saraswati knew well that the Lord was formerly known as Nimai Pandit, a very learned scholar of Navadvip, and his posing as a grateful was certainly to some purpose. Hearing this inquiry by the sannyasi, the Lord smiled and said, "My dear sir, if you do not mind, I will answer your inquiry." All the sannyasis there were very much pleased with the Lord for his honest dealings, and they unanimously replied that they would not be offended by whatever he replied. The Lord then spoke as follows. Vedanta Sutra consists of transcendental words or sounds uttered by the transcendental personality of Godhead. As such, in the Vedanta, there cannot be any human deficiency like mistake, illusion, cheating, or inefficiency. The message of the Upanishads is expressed in the Vedanta Sutra, and what is said there directly is certainly glorified. Whatever interpretations have been given by Sankaracharya have no direct bearing on the Sutra, and therefore such commentation spoils everything. The word Brahman indicates the greatest of all, which is full with transcendental opulences, superior to all. Brahman is ultimately the personality of Godhead, and he is covered by indirect interpretations and established as impersonal. Everything that is in the spiritual world is full of transcendental bliss, including the form, body, place, and paraphernalia of the Lord. All are eternally cognizant and blissful. It is not the fault of the Acharya Sankara that he has so interpreted Vedanta. But if someone accepts it, then certainly he is doomed. Anyone who accepts the transcendental body of the personality of Godhead as something mundane certainly commits the greatest blasphemy. The Lord thus spoke to the sannyasi almost in the same way that he spoke to the Bhattacharya of Puri, and by forceful arguments he nullified the Mayavad interpretations of the Vedanta Sutta. All the sannyasis that claimed that the Lord was the personified Vedas and the personality of Godhead. All the sannyasis were converted to the cult of bhakti. All of them accepted the holy name of the Lord Sri Krishna, and they dined together with the Lord in the midst of them. After this conversion of the sannyasis, the popularity of the Lord increased at Varanasi, and thousands of people assembled to see the Lord in person. The Lord thus established the primary importance of Śrīmad Bhāgavata Dharma, and he defeated all other systems of spiritual realizations. After that, everyone at Varanasi was overwhelmed with the transcendental Sankirtana movement. While the Lord was camping at Varanasi, Sanatana Goswami, who arrived after retiring from office, he was formerly one of the state ministers in the government of Bengal. Then, under the regime of the Nawab Hussain Shah, he had some difficulty in getting relief from the state service, for the Nawab was reluctant to let him leave. Nonetheless, he came to Varanasi and the Lord taught him the principles of devotional service. He taught him about the constitutional position of the living being, the cause of his bondage under material conditions, his eternal relation with the personality of Godhead, the transcendental position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his expansions in different plenary portions of incarnations, his control of different parts of the universe, the nature of his transcendental abode, devotional activities, their different stages of development, the rules and regulations for achieving the gradual stages of spiritual perfection, the symptoms of different incarnations in different ages, and how to detect them with reference to the context of revealed scriptures. The Lord's teachings to Sanatana Goswami form a big chapter in the text of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, and to explain the whole teachings in minute details will require a volume in itself. These are treated in detail in our book, teachings of Lord Chaitanya. At Mathura, the Lord visited all the important places. Then he reached Vrindavan, Lord Chaitanya appeared in the family of a high caste Brahmana. And over and above that, as a sannyasi, he was the preceptor for all the Varnas and ashramas. But he used to accept meals from all classes of Vaishnavas. At Mathura, the Sanodhya Brahmanas are considered to be in the lower status of the society, but the Lord accepted meals in the family of such a Brahmana also because his host happened to be a disciple of the Madhavendra Puri family. At Brindavan, the Lord took bath in 24 important bathing places or ghatas. He traveled to all the 12 important banas, forests. In this forest, all the cows and birds welcomed him as if he were their very old friend. The Lord also began to embrace all the trees of those forests, and by doing so, he felt the symptoms of transcendental ecstasy. Sometimes he felt unconscious, but he was made to regain consciousness by the chanting of the holy name of the Krishna. The transcendental symptoms that were visible on the body of the Lord during his travel within the forest of Vrindavan were all unique and inexplicable. And we have just given a synopsis only. So we will stop here. Now let me go back to the hard copy of the book and we'll see where till what paragraphs we've completed. Synopsis only. So we have covered till page number 34 today. So tomorrow we will start, and I believe it will be completing the introduction part. We have only 4 pages left. So we will start with this paragraph, some of the important places that were visited by the Lord. From here till the end of this introduction. So yeah. So we will stop here. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.